sign on the fence if you're interested in learning more about who we are, getting connected, or want to join us. We are always looking for good people to join us. So tonight is the second hearing that we're hosting. The first one was last week, Friday, and we are going to be facilitated by Mr. Toussaint Marson. He's going to be our facilitator tonight. And Toussaint? We also have a speaker for you tonight from our community, Papa John Kostet, who's a business owner in the community, and the community neighbors got together to keep his business from being burned down in the aftermath of George Floyd killing, and all the anger and all the frustration with that. So the night's focus of the hearings, and we want everybody to, and Toussaint is going to probably talk about this, we're going to invite everybody to come up and talk. We're going to focus on the police and fire department's response after the killing of George Floyd and white supremacy. So those are the topics that we're going to cover tonight. What's going to happen is this: we're going to collect all this information and put it in a report. The city did not put a commission together like the People's Commission. So Communities United decided we need to do this. We need to have a place where the community can talk about their feelings about this and talk about where do we go from here. So that's what this is all about. So we want you to be engaged in this process. This is by no means just something for us to present to you. We want you all to talk. This is a hearing. Toussaint is going to facilitate that process, and you'll be probably coming up to the mic and engaging in this whole process. So with that, I guess I will turn it over to Papa John. Let him tell his story.
Well, there are some advantages to being here wearing a mask. The FBI won't be able to get a good picture of me. I've been a business owner for 35 years in South Minneapolis, but also played music for over 50 years in this city, so I'm known in both areas. Our city created the police and the fire department to provide the citizens in our city protection from theft and to enforce the laws of the city and the state, plus to protect us from fires and other disasters. This is the public service that we all need. I have worked with many police officers and firemen through the years. They did a great job, and I held many of them in high regard. That's changed since the days I did that kind of work. I've had many more questions about the conduct of it. We've seen so much of it in the news, and which your group has been working on for many years. The unfortunate phrase of defund the police is a distraction. Even if the funds were cut for the Minneapolis police, it would not stop police violence. It could still continue. The city and the community needs to decide what it is that they want the police to do and how they want them to do it. That's our decision. They should be working for us. It should be our decision, and it should be our policies. Our elected officials should create and pass this policy and be held accountable for its effectiveness. However, I'm here because of what I saw and the reaction of the night of the reaction to George Floyd's murder and the subsequent violence in our city. It calls into serious question the conduct of the fire department and the police department. I live right in the middle of much of this action, and my business is right on the edge of it. I witnessed the events in person and through the excellent live citizen video coverage groups like Unicorn Riot, who broadcast online and in real time. My son is in Germany. He's stranded there because of COVID, but he knew as much or more than we did because he watched every one of the videos during the daytime because there are 8 hours difference there. The police did not appear to function as protectors of the people, which is what we want them to be, but instead the opposite. When the citizens gathered around the 3rd precinct, the police assaulted the peaceful protesters with pepper spray, flashbangs, rubber bullets, tear gas canisters, instead of simply protecting their building. This appears to be gratuitous violence against lawfully assembled citizens. The police did not protect their own building, and they failed to protect the business buildings right across the street. The videos show that demonstrators not only were not involved in the vandalism and in the arson, they actually were opposing it, which the police didn't seem to do. Throughout much of the violence, the police seemed to disappear. I don't know if any of you witnessed that. In my neighborhood, I live in Seward. My business is in Longfellow. They were nowhere to be seen. I don't know where they went. So we're paying people, we're paying ghosts. And why did they disappear? Were they afraid? Or were they doing it for some other reason? If you tried to call 911, there was no answer. We set up a call system in our community with our state representative, and we could report to him suspicious activity in our neighborhood, which was plentiful, I will tell you. Cars racing through our neighborhood with no license plates, not stopping at stop signs. It was a very dangerous situation. The businesses on East Lake Street, where my business is, we had zero police protection. Those that escaped the damage from the fires and the vandalism, they were protected by the people from the neighborhood. They came out and they stayed in front of our businesses all night long. Yeah, let's give them a hand. I will tell you. Can you imagine my feeling coming the next day not knowing if my building would be there, because I couldn't go out. I was obeying the law. They had the curfew, so I didn't go out. I didn't know if my business would be there. And I went there and everything was fine. And I talked to one of my tenants. There's a cafe there. I said, "Man, we're so lucky." And he said, "No, it's not luck. It's the neighbors." And he told me what they did. It was amazing. The fire department had a great challenge because of the many, many fires all around the Twin Cities area. However, there are a number of reports of the fire crews appearing to not give their full efforts. I've admired the fire department for a long time. I have never seen that happen. There's a video that was taken near the U.S. Bank on East Lake Street, not far from my business. A commercial building was on fire across the street from it. A fire truck arrived after a very, very long wait. There was somebody there videotaping all of this. The hoses were connected, and they're hooked up to the pumper, the fire truck, hooked up to the hydrants, but they didn't turn on the water. The fire was growing very quickly and was going to consume the building. Finally, in exasperation, the crowd began to chant, "Put it out, put it out." And they finally shamed the police into actually doing their job. I don't understand why that happened, but I saw it happen. Finally, they turned on the water and they quickly put the fire out, but the building was a total loss. It may have never been able to be saved, I don't know, but nevertheless, don't they understand public relations? They shouldn't do those kind of things in public. The Star Tribune did a major story calling into question many aspects of the fire department's response. They interviewed a fire station captain who said they were not allowed to leave their firehouse. Not allowed. The city is on fire, and they're not allowed to leave the firehouse. Fire crews were distraught in the building, in that firehouse, and some of them were even in tears, the story said, because their city was on fire and they were not allowed to do their job. There were many fires. We all agree. We know that was going on. But why did the Mayor Fry, not request a thing called the Mutual Assistance Program? This is where the various cities in the metropolitan area agree that if there's a disaster in one of their localities, that the others will come to their assistance if they're overwhelmed. This has been going on for a long, long time. That was never called into action. There was never requested for them to come and help. Plus, there are fire stations that didn't even have the fire trucks leave their place. The mayor should inform the citizens of Minneapolis why it is that they never made that call, why they never brought in the assistance, we would not have had as much destruction from fire and vandalism as we have today. It appears the police do not work for the welfare of citizens and businesses in Minneapolis. The mayor is in charge of the police and therefore is responsible for the lack of professional performance and should be held accountable. We, the citizens of Minneapolis, carry the burden of the cost of the police and the fire department, plus the city staff and the government. It costs us a lot of money. And we do that for a reason. We do that so that we are all protected, not just us personally, but our neighbors, and our neighbors we don't even know across the city. We want everybody to be protected from fire and from any other disaster. So the city has failed us. So has the state and the county. The question is, what can we do to get the government and the public safety that get us the public safety that we need and that we want, and yet not expose us and our citizens to murder by the police? Thank you very much.
All right, so with what Papa John just said, we want this conversation to go as fluidly as possible, and we don't have a lot of mobility with the microphones, unfortunately. So we'll ask people to just come up to this microphone and very quickly, speak their piece. But before we get to that, requesting people to come up here, real quick, I just want us to give our gut reaction. When I say post George Floyd, Minneapolis, what is the first word or phrase that comes to mind? Just raise your hand, I'll call on you and shout it out. Post George Floyd, Minneapolis. What's the first phrase that comes to mind? Yes. Revolution? What else? Yes.
Uprising.
Uprising? Yes. Shame. Abolition? Yeah. Fire. Take one more. Yeah. Huh? More will be revealed. So we have shame, revolution, abolition, fire, more will be revealed. Other terms as well. These all sound pretty active terms. So for people that were in Minneapolis throughout in their neighborhoods, we just heard Papa John give their testimony of what happened. Can you really quickly just, in a few words or a short story, just tell us, just step to the mic real quick and tell us what happened in your neighborhood in the wake of George Floyd? Just very quickly, or your experience with police and the fire department, or the lack thereof. What was their presence? What did their presence mean to you, and what did their absence mean to you? Real quick, just step to the mic and tell us what you think. And the idea of this is to be inclusive. We're not passive here. We're trying to get a conversation going, and we want to hear your testimonies on what did the absence of the fire and police department mean, or the presence of the fire and police department mean post George Floyd. Go ahead. Yeah. And you can line up too. This is totally fine. You can get in line. Yeah.
Hello. Is it working?
A little closer.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hey. So I live at the intersection of Lake and Lyndale, and for me, I didn't see any police at all. Maybe one fire truck, and what that signaled to my community was that the police just weren't gonna help us. No one was gonna be there to help out or even to clean up the fires. So what I saw was the community coming together, and each morning after protests, communities coming out and doing community cleanups. I saw medics coming out and protecting and serving their community during the protests, and really just the community stepping up and taking care of itself as opposed to the police or anyone else coming in and protecting them.
So I don't know if you're familiar with storytelling or any kind of art or any of that, but they say it's as important as what you put in as what you leave out. What do you think the reason was that you didn't see police presence. Well, what was the intent of that, do you think?
To me, the intent was
A little closer.
For me, the intent was the community in general was calling for to not have police, and I think the police were trying to show the community, well, look what happens if we're not here. And I think it backfired on them, because what happened when they weren't there was the community taking care of itself, as opposed to this like lawlessness that they try to portray it as.
Okay, and do you believe that that's happening right now as well? That they're still laying off the gas, the police?
I think they're coming on a little bit more in my community, but I still don't see them very much.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? What did the police and fire department's presence or absence mean to you? Really quickly, I know everybody experienced this. Yes, go ahead, Kelly.
So I was around on bicycle a lot right after George Floyd, and I kind of did a mini tour of police precincts, and they were barricaded. They were fortressed, and I think they were stuck inside, or they stayed at home. And I thought that was really offensive. It was it was a pictorial representation of how they mean to engage with community, and that is no.
So I'm assuming somebody on the outside is going to say, well, they burnt the 3rd precinct. Why wouldn't they protect the police precincts? So do you believe they were building the barriers to protect it, or what was the intention there?
Well, the way it looked is how it was perceived. So this is to keep people out and themselves in. There was that is a separation of people and the police state. And that's very clearly what their message is.
Okay, and what would you have preferred?
Well, I prefer no police.
Okay, and what goes in the place of that?
Ask the community. Ask the community, because, if we're coming out and holding businesses safe, and we're cleaning up streets, and we're nursing neighbors, and we're feeding people, that's what needs to happen. Police is about property protection, and maybe we need to rethink what that's all about.
Okay. Anybody else? More people. I know we need to hear from at least 5 or 10 more folks before we move on to the next thing. What was your experience with the presence or absence of the police and fire department? Yes.
Well, if you're talking right in our neighborhood, I saw things all over the city, but at my place at 42nd and Cedar in South Minneapolis, one of the things I saw was the National Guard going by in a convoy.
Yeah.
Armored personnel carriers, all that. I tried to yell at them and give them the finger, but of course they were all inside their armored personnel carriers, except for one guy standing up in his machine gun turret. I think he actually saw me.
Okay.
But that kind of military presence and that kind of idea that all that can be done to save the city is to bring in the U.S. military. At the state capitol, when I saw them, I asked, well, what do you, they were carrying these guns. I said, do you have live ammunition? And they said, yes, we do. So we brought in military troops who had nothing other than live ammunition to use in our city.
How long have you lived in Minneapolis?
Since '72.
Have you ever seen anything like that?
I don't believe I have, no.
So
I hope I don't again. I find that kind of military presence, that was extremely inappropriate. It's such a weak word, but it's just absolutely wrong to have that on our streets, or to have that around the state capitol when there was a peaceful demonstration there.
So just to wrap up on that, we're talking about the lack of police presence, but then the heightened presence of the National Guard. Do you think the National Guard in some way was kind of picking up the slack for the police, or taking over in a certain way, or were they both entirely separate?
I think it's kind of a separate thing. The police were concentrating their efforts on, firing at peaceful protesters and harming those folks. But the National Guard, it was as though, well, in the end, the police, they can't do anything about any of the actual fires, arson, that we need the National Guard as our military saviors to do this. And I think having the military in our city is absolutely terrible.
Okay, we'll touch up more on the National Guard as well. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, I also was living by Lake and Lindale, and I remember in the days following George Floyd's killing, there being a lot of helicopters all the time, and that was freaking me out. I was doing the lockdown thing, I was doing the pandemic thing, so I was staying inside for those days, but following my friends' Facebook streams and all the Facebook streams that were going around then, and Unicorn Riot, and I saw one night I was staying up and it was like 1 or 2 or 3 a.m. and the cops were just pushing people down Lake Street, pushing protesters and pushing people who were out after curfew. And then I heard them down my street because they came to like Lake and Lindale. And, I heard people running down the street and saying, "Oh, crap, gotta run." And heard stuff popping off along with helicopters going around. So I just, just staying up real late and being paranoid. It felt like, there was a military coming in from outside.
So, and with them pushing the protesters a certain direction, did you feel like there was a strategy in mind, or there was a plan, that the police had to like pit people in a certain direction or get them away from a certain thing?
No. Short answer, no. I mean, I saw...
Why not?
Because I saw footage that the cops are doing this in one direction down Lake Street, kind of towards Lake and Lindale, and then footage of them on the same night, bunch of National Guards and cops just pushing people, like not even on a major street or anything, but going down a neighborhood street. Somebody was on their porch, like filming it, and they said, "Hey, get inside," and they're like, "I'm on my porch," and they started shooting at them with pepper bullets. Saw another footage of them pushing someone right into their house, like going up on their porch and pushing them into their house and closing their door on them. It just looked like they were going everywhere. I mean, I guess the strategy was to just, if you see people, hurt them. But beyond that, it didn't seem like they had a map, a plan.
Yeah, because I do remember watching Unicorn Riot, and then there was another feed, and they were addressing that the protesters had outflanked the cops at some measure. And at that point, in my mind, I was like, well, there's clearly no plan here if you're getting outflanked by protesters. But I didn't know if there was an angle that they had, like they wanted to get them to go somewhere, or they were protecting certain businesses. I didn't know if that's what you felt when you were watching them at all. So I know everybody has a different perspective. But thank you. We want to hear from at least several more people. Before we move on. Because I think the experiences of folks post George Floyd in their neighborhood is really important. This is open to everybody, even if you're passing by.
Hello. When the National Guard was in town, my friend called me.
Just a little closer.
Okay. When the National Guard was in town, my friend called me because she received intelligence that the National Guard was planning to, what is it called when they have you surrounded? Cattle. They were planning to kettle the protests by Little Earth, and she lived a block from there, and she was afraid. So I set up a home medic station there in case protesters were getting hurt near there. And I stayed up all night with her at her house to guard her. But that must be the night you're talking about, that the protesters outflanked the police, so they failed in their plan. We did see the National Guard on Franklin and the police on Lake Street. So we were right in the middle between them. But the protesters got away, so... Power to the people.
And what neighborhood were you in? Over on
24th Street and 14th.
24th Street and 14th. And did the community there have to present their own
They put up barricades on the streets to try to prevent cars from driving through.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Several more people. Hey, Michelle?
Yeah. I was kind of trying to wait because I didn't want to talk so much,
That's
but,
okay.
For me, it was a kind of, I feel very mixed about this because I've been in this movement for a long time, like 33, almost 34 years. And I'd never seen people burn down a police precinct, and I frankly cheered that. I'm gonna be honest about it, okay? I was like, I'd never seen that before. The people are stepping up, holy mackerel, this was like great, right? But then I saw people burning down Benadir Academy, which is this beautiful place that's an alternative school for Somali youth. And I know the people that run that school, and it's a beautiful institution. I cried when I saw that, and I cried when I saw that people were burning down the public library, I just know that this was stuff that was being done by white supremacists. And I just know that we will never get to the bottom of it because the city doesn't give a damn that white supremacists came in our town and burned up shit to try to start a race war. And I'm really disgusted by that, you know?
Do you believe? I mean, I think it's pronounced McGizzy, or it's a indigenous center.
Yeah, McGizzy,
yeah, it's right next, and that got burnt down as well.
Right,
and once I
and
saw that, I
also-
was like, well,
Yeah, and also that other, I don't remember the name of it, the school that's like the online only school.
Yeah,
What's
yeah.
the name of that one? That, you know, it was like important that people, like, you know, have access to these schools, and it just hurt my heart. And it also hurt my heart, frankly, in a place that very well could be a food desert, to lose the 2 grocery stores in that neighborhood. You know, was problematic. I live in the north side, and I can tell you that I spent the night listening to lots of helicopters, people guarding the neighborhood, and things like that. That was my experience. But I cried when I saw on the TV that they burned down the Benedict Academy, because that's just wrong to me. You know, so it's like, I get that the people don't always get the targets right, and I'm very mixed about it, but I really do believe that an element of that was white supremacists. At the same time, I don't want to disparage that people stepped up and said, screw this, we're burning this goddamn police precinct, you know?
exactly.
I was like, I don't want it to be like, you know, like, oh, I'm condemning all of that, blah, blah. I'm not condemning that, you know?
Yeah.
And so I'm very mixed on it. I will also say I had a kind of a personal experience, because my pharmacy got burned. And I spent 3 days. I take a specialty medication that I have to take at a certain time every day. I have lung disease, and I spent 3 days being out of that medication because nobody had it, because it's a specialty medication, and my pharmacy got burned down. So I spent 3 days driving all over bigger and bigger circles around the city trying to find someplace that had this medication. So, you know, a little bit personal, not that, you know, I mean, everything revolves around me. It doesn't, and I get that. But, you know, I did have that personal impact. But like I said, I'm very mixed, mostly because I still feel like we have never investigated the role of white supremacists in this whole matter. And I'm disturbed by that, and I want to see that investigation happen.
And I want to ask you one question before you leave. So the 3rd precinct was evacuated, which seemed, I didn't think that would happen personally when I look at LA, or when I look at Chicago recently, or when you look at anywhere really in New York. Nothing really gets vacated. If anything, they ramp it up.
Right.
Why do you think the precinct was vacated, vacated and then left to burn?
You know, I think that they just decided that it was an overwhelming force from the people. And I love that the people had that much force. You know, I'm not upset by that. I love that. And, you know, like I say, 34 years of doing this, I've never seen people burn down a precinct. I don't know the whole history of every part of the movement in the whole U.S. So maybe it's happened sometime before, but I don't think it ever has. This was a very new level of resistance. And so, and I support that level of resistance. And I'm proud of the movement for letting it be known that you are not going to get away with this type of stuff. And that it was specific to the 3rd precinct, I think, is a beautiful thing. But like I said, at the same time, you know, then let's be a little bit more thoughtful about our targets here. You know, that was a great target. You know, burning down a grocery store, maybe not such a great target.
And we'll get into that a little bit later after this, to talk about white supremacists, agitators, out-of-towners, people from Virginia, and particularly northern Wisconsin. We'll get into that a little bit later. Okay. So thank you.
And Paul Gazelka's area, Baxter and Brainerd.
Yeah.
Don't forget that.
Well, yeah, no, I won't, and I know you won't let me. Yes, go ahead.
It's hard to talk to this mess, you know. Everybody's 6 feet from me, so you'll be all right. I've been in this neighborhood indirectly by going to church here until I got conscious and I stopped doing church. But I think basically the problem, we're not looking at the elephant in the room. Reparations, equal pay for equal rights. And the human rights of black people have been degraded for over 400-something years. All of this is just a precursor to what's to come. You don't see what you said you saw before, police stations burning down, grocery stores being burned down by perpetrators outside the neighborhood. All of this is a recipe of change. It hurts. Women tell you, try to go through 9 months of pregnancy, then have that baby. We're going through 400-something years of racial prejudice and pregnancy. And now it's time to have the baby of humanity. See, we've been tripping about white, black, and yellow and all those unknowledgeable both people to God. He didn't create yellow, black. He created a bouquet. He says, okay, you're the human race. Where we start fighting not just Black Lives Matter, but all lives matter with Black lives intended, then you have to equal the playing field. Economic justice is what's needed. Why are we still 1.2% of the wealth after 400 and something years? You took all of Wall Street. Every time we got ourselves together, you tore us down. Yes, white supremacy is here, and it will only be here as long as we allow it to be. You are the modern abolitionists. You know, you're the John Browns, the Martin Luther Kings. I have a dream. See, I portrayed King and Malcolm on the college circuit. I'm an artist. But my heart is finally saying, speak out on my feelings, not theirs. They lived their time. I'm living a time, I'm 62, and I've never seen the world shut down. No football, basketball, they stopped ballet. Look, this is so serious that the universe is asking us, so when are y'all gonna do it? When are y'all gonna make that final mixing bowl just right, that batter just tastes right, everybody fit in and that color blended just right? And that's our humanity. It's not our color, it's our humanity. When we think alike, when we see alike, when we want alike. I want to be having a boat on around the lakes, but y'all got all the damn houses. We got to change that. I want to go bungee jumping, but you got all the bridges. I want to go jump out of a plane, but you got all the planes. You get my meaning. I want what I work for. Now, reparations include this. You can't just say, I'm going to give you a house in Maple Grove and I can't pay the rent. You got to pay me what my ancestors worked for, died for, and made America great. And she didn't get a dime.
So when the 3rd precinct burned down,
when it burned down, that was the part of the revolution.
Do you feel that that was people demanding reparations in a certain sense of justice?
That's what I felt, because that was the greatest sense that I could see that emotion being so intensive that we'll destroy the authority of this country. Revolution, Martin Luther King said, is the voice of the poor. When they don't have a voice, they will give you chaos. But then the infiltrators, as the sister said, those white supremacists, let's not act fool. This ain't checkers, this chess. They playing us like pawns in the game, having us doing community talks. But if we gonna talk, what we gonna do? Y'all know that we need reparations. Until y'all start talking about that, I'm just gonna lay back and look at you. But that's what's on my mind, peace.
Well, real quick before you leave, what do reparations look like to you?
Reparations look like to me, in terms of not to collapse a country, but to make it have an equitable process that everyone who are the direct descendants of slaves, not everyone that jumped on the bandwagon came over and got here. Now, you can do bloodline, you can do the culture test.
You can do Ancestry.com. Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah. So let's get it straight. We shouldn't be paying no taxes for no time soon. That'll give us some money that they ain't got to worry about. Free education, land. What happened to my 40 acres in the mule? I never got it. I'm still looking for it.
Yeah.
So all of the things you promised, when the president switched positions, Lincoln went out, another cat came in and said, hey, I'm going to take that away from him.
Yeah.
So what reparations look like is the equal playing field. You live in the Hamptons, I live in the Hamptons.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. And that, do you want to speak to that?
I was just going to say, to the point about reparations, the people who owned slaves were paid reparations for the slaves that was no longer their property. They were reimbursed for that.
Okay. Got a little history lesson here. And I think the word reparations is also interesting in some of the rage that was expressed. If we're not going to get justice, if this doesn't look like we're going to get justice, well, then we're going to make it ourselves. We're going to establish it ourselves. And I know that there's been different takes on how one should express their rage. And I always go back to saying I do not condone or condemn the way anybody expresses their rage. There's no judgment here. And I know that we're really torn on that, as you've seen in the press lately and at a lot of forums. A lot of folks are torn on that. Want to hear from one or two more people. What was your experience post George Floyd immediately with the presence or the absence of the police and fire department? Go ahead. Everybody here felt something. Okay.
So I know for myself personally, I live over kind of adjacent to Lena, between there and Stevens Square. Once the uprising started, then like police presence became more like sirens blasting down Franklin or down Lyndale and just kind of scaring folk in and out of their houses. And the community stepped up. We created a number of channels that we could all communicate with, and actually had it so that we had roles. If you had medical experience, if you had experience, if you were an ex-firefighter, if you had done EMT training, whatever, you could basically list yourself. So then all of a sudden, I became one of a handful of people that basically acted as dispatchers. So that over the course of the evening, when people didn't know what was going on, or we heard that there were fires that had spread or been started on people's porches, like we banded together as a community and actually requisitioned the resources ourselves. And it's because there was no fire, there was no police, anything beyond the scope of where it was actively happening. The rest of the community was ignored. We're still there.
Yeah.
And I know even in the months that have followed, even as recently as a month ago, I had my car broken into and, lost sets of tools and all that stuff. And when I contacted the police about it, they were like, well, because of COVID, we don't actually come out anymore. So we'll just do this by phone, and here's your police report number. Okay, thanks.
Okay.
So it has not just been an abandonment when we needed them in the moment of crisis. When we needed them, we clearly didn't. But not just in that moment of crisis and unsure times, but even through now, where it's like, yeah, we're living in a pandemic. That is still a very real thing and a very real thing to consider. But are you telling me you can't come out and actually do the job?
Yeah.
Like, then it becomes even more clear to me that they're just not needed.
So if you had to gamble on this, what do you think the future is going to be? Do you think that this kind of like decreased demeanor continues, or does it ramp up above what they were usually acting on?
Well, I think the whole point is that, we have that money in the right places, so that people who are actually qualified to do the job are doing the job. And it's just like clear. And I mean, clearly, if it's not even that they can't even present themselves to do the job that they're supposed to be doing, then what purpose are they serving other than to terrorize us?
Okay, thank you. I do want to hear from just any people of color, any folks of color, their experience. I mean, because mine was different than white folks, or at least the feeling of it was different. But I just want to hear, yeah.
How y'all doing? King Demetrius, independent journalist, photographer.
A little closer.
What I experienced was very discombobulating. During the time of George Floyd being tragically murdered, we basically witnessed a pandemic on top of a pandemic. We must think about what happened to Philando Castile, Jamar Clark. A nation of people have been sitting back waiting patiently for police officers, the mayor, what have they, to just do the right thing. But what we witnessed with George Floyd, by it being a pandemic, people were sitting at home. All the people that was computer boxers, computer twitters, computer fighters, they got a chance to witness a lynching. And by them seeing that, people were hungry to come outside and do something. They had to put their boots on the ground. And when that occurred, my video footage, May the 25th, went viral. Facebook, AKA Facebook, because 98.9% of the cases that's out here in America is being solved is through Facebook. Facebook work through police, et cetera, et cetera. People need to know that and be careful what you put out there. So when my video went viral, they expeditiously shut my page down.
Wow.
Expeditiously. They told me I was violating a whatever. I reached out to them. They said, okay, you in there for 48 hours. Next thing I know, went from 48 hours to a whole month. I can't make this up. So I couldn't live stream. I couldn't put no footage up there for a whole month. So all the people that I was documenting things, people was relying on me, people that's in wheelchairs, people that can't come out, etc., who always look at my feet was no longer to look at my feet, or anybody who wanted to support me couldn't do that. So what we witnessed after the murder of George Floyd, we witnessed a shrew of money come through Minnesota, not so nice, if you will.
Yeah.
George Floyd is not just the hashtag when it comes to someone being killed. More will be revealed. That's why I said more will be revealed. Because when Philando Castile was killed in that car, to be in the jury room, to hear him scream, and a baby in the back seat, to be in the courtroom and to hear the echo, it did something to me. And anybody else who was in that courtroom, it had to do something to them too. They did nothing. Now, when it happened to George Floyd, they said enough is enough. And when they burned down the precinct, I said, all right, what's next? And believe me, a lot of black people don't play with fire, just so we clear. They wasn't burning down all those buildings like that. And as I was doing my coverage, as I was still documenting and taking photos, and I was just like, who's really burning down all these properties? That's what came to my mind. But now we got to deal with the aftermath. Why aren't we, as a nation, as a community, buying this property, putting money in this property, saying, okay, we're going to have this for the community. This is going to be for the community. We're not finna let someone fly away from out of town and come here and say, oh, I got $4 billion. I want to buy this whole block. We need to be out here organizing and putting something together. That's how we make change.
So I want to ask you two things based off of what you said. You were in the courtroom when they heard of Philando Castile. So, and again in film, you know, it's odd that if I said, hey, Terrence Franklin was shot in the basement, back of his head, ballistics say it was execution style. You can imagine that in your mind. However, somebody gets shown George Floyd, they have an entirely different reaction. Why don't you think people had the reaction to Philando Castile that they had to George Floyd? And why does it take a full-on 8 minutes and 40 seconds for somebody to watch that for kind of like white folks to show up? Or for an entire city to show up, I should say, as well.
The city showed up and they showed out in such a way because they were tired of being tired. The difference with Philando Castile is basically people was basically being biased to a black man having a right to have a pistol.
Okay, yeah.
That part, for one. And they made all types of assumptions. He was speaking in a professional manner. Sir, I have a weapon. The officer gave him 2 orders. Give me your license. As he was reaching for his license, he indicated, I have a weapon. And before he can even pull it out, the man just shot him. I mean, it was like, I would say it in the musical terms because some people are very familiar with music. I'm familiar with Billie Holiday as she was singing Strange Fruit Swinging in the Tree. I knew something was wrong. But when I heard Nina Simone sing it, I knew I had to do something about it. So that was the difference. And when they seen what happened with George Floyd, but when they knew they wasn't doing nothing right with Philando Castile, they said, we know this time we're gonna make Minneapolis, Minnesota, St. Paul ground zero. We're gonna do whatever we have to do by any means necessary.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
So, what King Demetrius Pendleton brought up was folks burning down buildings. And so I want to get to this really quick. What was your experience or your take on the buildings burning down and also the rhetoric that was surrounding it? A lot of folks saying, and then this happened when Freddie Gray was murdered in Baltimore and they burned the city. And a lot of people were like, why are they burning the city? And a really quick answer was, well, when you've been treated and dehumanized for so long, the only way to really show people how you feel is to show them how you feel. And the idea in burning a building is that building can be built back. You can't bring Freddie Gray back. So, but some of these things got burned down like just on general principle. I mean, we saw McGizzy get burned down, the library get burned down of all places. What was your experience with agitators, white supremacists, or maybe the myth of, if that was a case? I was just discussing that with some folks from Justice Frontline Aid today. What was your experience with that? Even Papa John Kolstad, if you could speak to it, what was your experience with agitators, white supremacists, and folks that were out there just to destroy things? And how was that handled in your community, if at all?
We've seen a lot of stolen cars, a lot of cars with no license plates.
A lot of stolen cars, a lot of cars with no license plates?
We've seen so much activity. And when I start seeing banks being targeted,
Come to the mic, King Demetrius, so everybody can hear you. I'm sorry. If we're gonna get a wireless one, I'm gonna get a wireless one for the next one, just so we can float it around.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
When I start noticing banks, individuals hooking up changes to the cash machine and trying to basically rip them apart, I knew this was not the work of an amateur. This was the work of somebody has been watching First 48 or been just watching films like, oh, this is how you do this.
Yeah.
And they was actually getting away with it. They were coming in our communities. They had unmarked cars. It was a lot of white supremacists right here in North Minneapolis. People had to come out here armed up. People had to arm themselves and police their own community because the police would not do their job.
Okay. All right. Yeah, Brixton. Did you want to just speak to the mic? Yeah.
The thing that really turned me, I don't want to out myself, but in the mid 90s, I spent a lot of time doing property damage on the West Coast.
Okay.
And we in general had a lot of respect, not for banks and that, but post offices were generally considered off the list.
Yeah.
And walking around the day after everything went down, I saw 2 burnt out post offices. So
You talking about Minneapolis or West Coast?
That was in Minneapolis.
Oh, yeah.
Right by the 3rd precinct and near the 5th precinct.
Yeah.
And that just in the back of my mind has really made me think who was out there doing that.
Exactly.
It wasn't my people.
Yeah. Anybody else? Like, what actually enlightened you to the idea that that something was amiss or there was agitation occurring? Yeah.
Hey, what's up? So I wasn't living in Minneapolis at the time, but right after the 3rd precinct was burned, following that, when protesters and agitators alike were trying to take the 5th precinct, that Friday or Saturday night, I got a call from a couple of friends who live off of 40th in Chicago. And what I experienced that night was, because of outside agitators, because of white supremacists, these neighborhoods physically had to lock themselves down. We were doing block patrol. We were checking in with neighbors. People were riding around on their bikes, on their scooters. It wasn't an official autonomous zone, but the fact that these white supremacists and outside agitators came from out of state, came prepared, came ready to start a race war, they knew exactly what they were doing. And these communities have to be prepared for that. And we witnessed that by staying up till 4 a.m. in shifts when we'd be on the block making sure everybody was okay, and some unmarked vehicle, whether it was a van or some dumbass Mercedes all blacked out, would stop in front of us. Okay, what are they going to do to us? Do we disperse? Do we do this? Do we approach them? And that was kind of like a call to me, like, okay, nobody's fucking around with this anymore. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm curious, how did you know, when you saw folks out, how did you know that they were white supremacists or that they were agitators? How do you make the determination between somebody who is who is out here for justice, for anger over an injustice occurred in Minneapolis, or somebody who's out here just to break shit? How do you make that determination? I'm very curious to know. Like, fill me in. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I'm just. Yeah, just line up. Yeah, this is what this is all about. Like, we want to get everybody's take on this. If you haven't spoken, you should have spoken by the end of this forum. Yeah, go ahead.
So I live over on the north side. I live on 36th and Fremont. And I had an interesting experience in...
Just a little closer to the
Sorry. In kind of the very beginning of everything, in the first couple days, it was very quiet on the north side. It was really interesting. It was very, like, untouched and protected. Like, nobody wanted to mess with the north side. And it was really, really cool. Until we heard just a lot of kind of, like, the rumors kind of that you were talking about, just of white supremacy and kind of people seeing groups of people. I heard lots of stories about like KKK presence. I heard lots of stories about people in full regalia and stuff like that. And that's when a lot of like the real fear and like the real fires started to happen on the north side, specific places being targeted.
Do you know who caused the fires, or do you have an idea of who did cause the fires?
Well, it's kind of just, again, those rumors of white supremacy, but no specific evidence, but also the idea that, like, if you see someone in full KKK regalia, you're not going to stop to take a photo of them. You're going to get the fuck out of there.
Yeah, maybe.
So it was a lot of like what is true, what is not, what is kind of just like people's fear brewing inside of them and that. But there was also an interesting experience of communities coming together, and to a certain extent, the way I saw my neighbors come together, it was like one of the safest I've ever felt in my neighborhood.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really interesting. It was really interesting to see everybody come together and kind of really be a community. It was really cool, especially being like one of the only white girls in a very like north side neighborhood to kind of be accepted into that. Was a really cool experience.
Did you not feel accepted before?
I mean, not to a certain, not accepted, but I guess I probably hadn't made myself as welcoming as I should have as well. Like there was a big piece of that I was missing as well. And so it was kind of a cool opportunity for all of that to come together.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else with white supremacists? Like, how did you know that somebody was a white supremacist, or even from videos that you saw? You may not have been out in the field. Yeah.
Well, one of my neighbors, an African-American man who lives, like a few blocks away from me, and who is a good friend of mine, reported to me, called me up because he was trying to walk to his house, and these guys were literally following him down the street and like calling out names at him and all of this stuff and waving guns and all of this. And several people that I know reported similar experiences like that. So, and I heard them independent of each other. It wasn't like people all got, oh, that happened to me too. It was like independent reports that I heard of. And we had really tried to get the Minneapolis Freedom Fighters here tonight. Unfortunately, they weren't available, but they had a lot of those experiences to relate that, they were in the neighborhood protecting businesses and people in those neighborhoods because there were people running around, white guys from out of town or wherever the hell they're from, driving around, intimidating people, pulling guns on people, scaring people, and threatening and burning businesses. So it is a real thing that this really happened. Some of the few people that have been arrested so far for some of these fires and this stuff, where do they live? Baxter, Brainerd, and all of this stuff. So I don't, we're out of state even. I think there is a real thing there with that, And the other thing that I do want to throw in as a movement leader, somebody that does organizing and protests and things like that, we've had some very interesting experiences as organizers of protests with white supremacists actually doing things like they will go on our Facebook events and copy our Facebook events. Like they'll, I don't know what you call that. I don't know what you call that, but where they like create phony events at different locations. Yeah. And all of this kind of stuff. So there's a lot of like sort of movement interference that I see happening, and they show up at our events. We've had problems with these white supremacist media, so-called, like Alpha News and Mill City
One
Media.
American Network. Yeah.
These other ones, showing up and basically infiltrating the movement. So it's, I do think that there's both the kind of very crude thing that you see like in the streets, but also some very sophisticated stuff that they're involved in trying to disrupt our movement. And so I do believe it's a very real thing. I don't think it's just rumors or anything like that, because my own folks around me were experiencing that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, my business is on East Lake Street, as I said, and a number of places were hit in our area. One was a liquor store, and it was hit by professionals. I call them professionals because they had steel bars inside their doors, and they were heavy steel, square steel stock. These are substantial, and I said, how did they get in? He said they came with sawzalls that cut metal. So these were professionals. This is the way all those places were broken into, because most of them had security. And so these professionals are coming in. So these people were people who knew exactly what they were doing. They would come, they would hit fast, they would get what they knew what they wanted from that place. Also, the fires that were started in our area, I talked to a number of people, and I've had some fire experience myself. Not burning places, but of studying it. Yeah, well, okay. I don't want to talk about that one. Anyway, we were talking about the fires in that area, and interesting. A lot of them were some really wonderful old buildings that got burned down, which cannot be replaced.
Yeah,
really.
El Nuevo Rodeo. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a shame. I love that building, and I did many things there. But anyway, someone pointed out that these fires were all started by people who knew exactly what they were doing.
Yeah.
This was not being done by amateurs. And so I don't know if they're white supremacists or not, because I didn't see any of them. But the guy with the umbrella, we call him the umbrella guy,
man, yeah,
who was breaking all the windows right at the very beginning of that. It's pretty clear that he is a white supremacist.
Well, it's interesting that you say professionals and then amateurs. And Papa John, I want to ask you if you do remember the most recent riot, a recent riot that involved primarily white folks in Minneapolis. Can you remember when that was and what that was about?
I'm not that old.
I didn't say that.
I don't know of any case.
The Go for Hockey riots, when the Minnesota Gophers won the national championship for hockey, they rioted in the streets, and I know because I was there, and I remember seeing it. And people tried to burn things, and they weren't really good at it. And nothing seemed to really have gotten destroyed except for a liquor store and some cars. And so when you mentioned the liquor store having bars over it, I remember you liquors on, I believe it was in Stadium Village. It just got broken into because it had glass windows, but nobody really burned it to the ground. Yeah. Did you find it as curious as I did when you saw like every single speedway was burned from the inside out, that every single all these buildings were like methodically burned from the inside out? It seemed
and all the Walgreens, and it is interesting that the post offices were hit, because I don't know if everybody loves the post office, but I certainly do. I have an enormous regard for the people that do that. They do a tremendous job for my business and for us personally. So I don't know why anybody who is angry about anything, why they would pick on the post office, who bring us our checks and bring us all the things that we need.
Exactly.
It doesn't make sense. I think this was a political target. So whoever did that, I think they had a reason. I just don't know what it is for sure. I could speculate, but that wouldn't. I don't really know.
Yeah, no. Thank you for sharing. That gives us some insight. Yes.
Hi. So I can kind of speak a little bit more to some of the things I saw after the protest for Jacob Blake, because after that there were some youth that were violently arrested by the police, and then after I had gone home from that protest, I saw on Unicorn Riot's feed that there were people gathering outside of the jail demanding that they be released. And so after I saw that, a friend and I went back downtown to kind of like just be there in solidarity, basically. And a couple things that we saw while we were down there that were I don't know if they were necessarily white supremacists or just police. I mean, it's pretty synonymous, but they were sketchy. And so when we got down there, when we pulled up, there was like a blacked out truck with just this huge, I think it was an American flag, just like flying behind. And that was like definitely not like promising. And then as soon as we got in, so we were like down there, but as soon as we got there, I think the police had started to like disperse people, so the crowd was kind of all over like some of the streets around the jail. And then some people were going home because they gave unlawful assembly orders, and some people were hanging around. And while we were hanging with some people, there was like, somebody informed us there was like this blacked out like van, I guess, with a bunch of dudes with radios and stuff in there. And like I said, it could be the police just being shady. It could be white supremacists, but that was also like very alarming. So then I think a lot of people dipped out after that, because at that point, like the protesters were outnumbered. And then on our way back to our car, we actually were like turning a corner kind of by Washington, and there was this gray, like, it looked like an Amazon Prime van, but it was completely unmarked. And as we were like turning to go towards our car, this van like peeled around the corner, went up on the curb, like by us. And with what we've seen in Portland lately, like that was really scary. They went up on the curb and then they just proceeded to go. But like, so I don't know what that was, but those are just some of the things that I've seen just in pertaining to like the Jacob Blake thing and what happened after that were kind of like white supremacist-ish.
And let's say those were all intended means of intimidation. Does that make you second guess or want to kind of step away from peaceful protesting or marching?
No, that makes me want to be out there even more, because when I see that stuff happen, like strength in numbers, like you really want people from your like community there to stand in solidarity with the community, just to be there to support. So actually when that gray van like rolled up, we had been walking with a group of like 6 or 8 people from the protest, and we were like walking with them, but they had to go to their car. And right when that happened, they were actually still in their car, like at that light. So we felt like a little bit of comfort knowing like if something did go down, they were going to be there to at least witness it. So even if you can't interfere with something that's going to happen, just being there, documenting, and like being able to show up for the people, I think is super important.
Okay, thank you. And I don't mean to skip you, sir. I know you've been waiting here for a while. Did you want to speak? I do. Yeah, I saw you come up a long time ago. I'm like, I'd rather get to you first. Yeah.
So I was actually gonna speak.
Just get a little closer to the mic, sorry.
I was actually gonna speak on some of the same things. The Saturday after George Floyd was murdered, me and a friend were out at University in Dale. Buses were down, grocery stores were shut down. We were handing out food and supplies. And we had been out all day, and probably starting at about 6 o'clock, we saw a whole change in the traffic. Up until that point, it was normal traffic. And then we started seeing official-looking vehicles, vehicles with flags flying, and to me, it was like a very big intimidation strategy. But it also, like, it made me more aware where, when I'm out now, like, I'm more aware in what I'm looking at and who to watch out for. But also, it kind of makes me wish that they all just did that too, so we could just know.
Do you feel that the police in Minneapolis would enforce any kind of law upon these agitators or intimidators?
Oh, no.
Why not?
Because I think they're one and the same.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So I want to. Do you want to speak real quick? Just and then we'll go on to the next topic. That's all part of the same thing.
Hello, my name is Wayne. I raised my family in South Minneapolis. Live in South Minneapolis. I was at the first protest, and even there, the police were being really unconstructive. They were not I mean, people were just pouring in from everywhere. It was an amazing sight to see, and yet they were running around with their cars in ways that were really dangerous, I think, for a lot of people in the area.
How are they dangerous?
And also, well, the fact that it would make people afraid, because they were moving down the street so fast.
Oh.
This was a little further away from on Chicago there, but they were still, and really unnecessarily harassing people at that point, which only inflamed the crowd even more.
This is the night after, or
this is the same? Yeah, this is the day after. Yeah.
Day after. Okay.
So but what I want to say is, I think I really congratulate Communities United for holding these hearings, because this is what the public hearings in the state should be doing right now.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think these people are afraid of opening a can of worms, that they are looking at some of their own folks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who made some phone calls to some people and said, "Hey, why don't you come to Minneapolis and create some trouble?"
Yeah.
I mean, you cannot look at what happened to our city and think, all these people were peaceful protesters. No, they weren't. And I talked to business people along the way. Some of them reported, one guy was looking out of his apartment. His family runs a business at Lake Street. It was fortunately saved. He could see a bunch of 4 big white guys with vans that went into the broke into the marathon and spent 2 hours unloading the place while the police were wandering around the city.
Wow.
So I mean, there's evidence there that should be called. Another during the hearings at the Senate, in the Senate in Minnesota here, a African American guy owns a gas station down on I think it's Nicollet or Lyndale, 40th area. He says the people that robbed his place, he saw it on camera. They're professionals. And he said there's a whole string of people around the country that systematically go to cities and rip off businesses, small businesses.
Yeah.
And these are some of the people that nobody wants to find out who they are.
Okay.
And we should demand that.
Exactly. And it's interesting you bring that up. Thank you. A friend of mine who lives in Oakland spoke to watching a singular human flip a dumpster and set it on fire. And basically illustrating it as being professional. He'd never seen a dumpster flip that quick by one person, pivoted at a certain axis point that was so fast, it was as if they had done it many times before. So to say that all these speedways are just somehow getting, burnt from the inside out perfectly, it would be a little bit messy to say that it was done by just somebody else that's not a professional. But getting to now, you mentioned something right now, the city should be holding these types of hearings. My question to everybody, and I really want to let's get a line of 10 folks on this. You say the city should be holding these types of hearings. Let me give you the scenario, what I know. And by all means, I am not omitted from this conversation. If I say something that is factually incorrect, get up here and correct me. Because we're here to put out questions. I have really no answers. I'm just posing the question to you. So the scenario right now is this. When Lisa Bender holds a city, when she does one of her meetings, she allows 100 people in and holds out 200 plus. What I heard from certain community members is that when somebody disagreed with her, she muted them. Lisa Bender is the president of the Minneapolis City Council. So that's a lot of power right there. It's a lot of power. The folks that are holding down 38th in Chicago, the autonomous zone on George Floyd Square, they're holding a forum this coming Wednesday or Thursday. There is no limit to how many people can come in. Come on, come on. So I'm painting the picture here for you. But moving forward, we're just seeing all of these headlines saying that crime is ramping up, the police are nowhere to be found. Alondra Cano is on the city council study hearing thing, whatever it's called, saying, oh my God, I heard 50 gunshots over the past weekend. I guess this is the new norm near 38th in Chicago. Andrea Jenkins says crime is ramped up around 38th in Chicago. And it sounds like the language to me is really, really pointed at 38th in Chicago to possibly point out 38th in Chicago as a danger zone and give an excuse for the city to come in. That's the picture. That the police are nowhere to be found, crime is ramping up in Minneapolis, and city council members are holding meetings that are holding more people outside of it than they are holding in. My question to you is, what do you want changed about this, if anything at all? What do you want to see changed? And then also, what do you think the hell is going on? What's happening here? Like, I know everybody has an idea. What is going on? Like, get up here and tell me, real quick. What do you think is going on here? Is this a strategic move, or is this is the business as usual after everybody has a riot in their city? What do you think is going on, and what do you want to see changed? Go ahead. We can wait. Come on. Get up here. Doesn't have to be a long explanation. I just want to know what you think is going on. Yeah.
Just one thing I want to say. I think with this, and as well as the language used by like major news corporations surrounding the protests, like they were often referred to as riots, is I think one of the strategies they're trying to do is take suburban areas and people in suburban areas who aren't part of the action every day or aren't in the community every day, and to turn them against everybody in the community. I think, though, something important to note is like those of us who have connections, those of us who have family members in suburban areas, we should actively be having those conversations about what's actually happening. So that's one thing we can do right now to change.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, more people. I want to know, what the hell do you think is going on, and what needs to change, if anything at all? Yes.
So it's funny you brought that up, because last night I actually just watched, I don't know if it was KSTP or somebody did the special on 38th in Chicago, and it was so cringy. It was like 10 minutes, and it was just them shitting on the community members there that have been holding it down and that have been like supporting each other in the autonomous zone. And it was so terrible to watch. Like, I was just screaming at the whole time, because the language that they use is so, like, obviously it's divisive, but what I think is going on, or like what they're trying to do, is there's only like, so there's people that live in Minneapolis, but then there's people who live in Minnesota around Minneapolis that don't keep up with the day-to-day. They don't keep up with city council or the charter amendment meetings or like literally anything. And so all they see is Minneapolis residents said defund the police. Now they see that the crime's going up. And so like they're trying to paint out this picture like we already defunded the police, which we didn't. And like, it's just creating not only like throughout the nation, because they're all looking at us, but also just throughout the rest of Minnesota. Like, some of my family members that don't live in Minneapolis think the same. They think like it's total anarchy and total chaos down here, and it's not. So I think they're really just trying to set that up for people to have false assumptions about it. And as far as what I think needs to be changed, we have, like, I go to these forums, like the commission hearing, like these forums, but also the other ones you posted. Like, we do them all over all the time, and never are there leaders there. Nobody's ever recording it. Nobody's ever putting it on the news. All they put on the news is like after the Jacob Blake rally, when there was like, it got a little hairy, or like after that thing that happened down on Nicollet Mall, like they put that stuff on the news, and they don't cover any of the actual like intellectual discussions on these issues. And it's really frustrating. So I think that's what they need to do. They need to show up, they need to show their faces, and they need to sit and listen, and not take a photo op, and not just and not even speak on the matter, just listen.
Do you think some of these council members need to get replaced next year?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I do.
All right, thank you. Yeah, more people. What the heck is going on, and what do you want to see changed?
I think Lisa Bender is precisely the white moderate that Martin Luther King Jr. talked about in his letter from Birmingham jail.
What did he say about the white moderate in his letter from Birmingham?
He said that they take a patriarchal role over black people and try to say, you need to simply sit down. I approve of you wanting your freedom. I cannot approve of the way you're going about it. And I think that's what Lisa Bender is doing, and I think she's also trying to appeal to other white moderates. And some of these white moderates may actually think of themselves as progressives, because when they saw George Floyd die from a man kneeling on his neck for nearly 9 minutes, they finally came out and said, hey, that was wrong. But the fact is, if you're able to be pulled back by what Lisa Bender is claiming, maybe you aren't so progressive after all. But what I would like to see from Lisa Bender specifically is I would like to see her or try to earn the votes of her black constituents like she tries to earn the votes of her white constituents.
Okay. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah. Go ahead.
Hello. I think that it's kind of like a smokescreen tactic. Thank you. Appreciate it. So it's pretty much the meetings that go on. A lot of them are in ways that are easy for me to miss. And so to get information about that or to become privy to it is a challenge for me personally.
Yeah.
And then also there's a lot of focus on business, like business development. And then where I live in the 9th Ward, there's like the arts stuff, like on the Lake Street area by, I think it's 4th. There's a Salvation Army store there, and they put this big garden there. It's like, oh, that's great. You know, it's a garden. I don't know if they use city resources for this, but it's frustrating because to get your voice heard with the city council is definitely a challenge. It's a process to even get a meeting, and I have a lot of respect for the folks out there that are trying to do that, and I can understand how people get frustrated when they don't feel like they're heard. So, and then the other thing is I think to disarm the police, like not to say what they do in the UK or in England is the correct way or anything, but they police by consent. And the police officers don't even carry a firearm. So what I hear, like the ones that walk around on the streets.
Yeah, same in Japan too.
So it's possible because when people are heavily armed like that, it's making tension, and when there's not conversation happening, not only with the city council, but with the police, they're just there to project violence. Is how I experience it. So those are the things I wanted to say. Thank you all for listening.
Do you believe the police are intentionally decreasing their presence to say, "Told you so"? Or what is the intent, if anything at all?
I mean, when people gather, like what I experienced downtown, yeah, that was that was a show of force. Definitely, there was no negotiation, no conversation.
Well, I'm saying like day to day.
In the day to day, I'll admit. I mean, I'm not as impacted by it. Really.
Okay.
I do hear a lot. I hear a lot of sirens.
Yeah.
And that, but I don't know. My trust has gone way down. For any trust for police, like.
Okay.
It's a broken system basically. Not only with the local politics, but with the police as well. They need citizen accountability, some sort of oversight that's separate from city council or the police themselves.
Okay, thank you. All right, we got about 10 minutes or less here. I want to hear from people that still wanted to talk. We got like less than 10 minutes.
I'm Rick. I live in Northeast Minneapolis. I got involved in a police brutality fight 20 years ago. And, we had our meetings with the, auditoriums filled with city council members and nothing, okay? You're talking about what's going on right now. My friend got knocked out in front of Cub by a couple people who probably were shoplifting, and the workers were pushing him out, and my friend and I were on our way. We ended up right in the middle of it. He got knocked out cold. Okay, so he's asking the cops what are they going to do. Well, they said they're not going to do anything. Now, they stopped my tenant who had left, had been gone a couple of years. He came back to pick up some tools he had left. And the cops stopped him in the middle of the afternoon in August. And I go out, what did you stop Kevin for? They said he didn't have a light above his license plate. So these guys will go out and do things if they can harass people of color. back then, 20 years ago, there was an African American professional woman working downtown. She had been stopped 22 times driving down Central Avenue to go home in Columbia Heights.
So your Lieutenant Kevin was a person of color?
Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to.
Okay. What do we need to do now? I really support this concept of the Civilian Police Accountability Council. That's giving the community control of the police. We hire them. The real elephant in the room is the white supremacist racist cops. We cannot have racist B cops. And I can go and sit down with some of these guys for probably wouldn't take 20 minutes for a lot of them. And I can tell you who I would not want on that police department.
Okay.
All right. I grew up with them.
Yeah.
I know them. Okay. So that's the number one thing we got to do. If we don't get racists out of the cops, we haven't won a damn thing.
All right.
All right. And the idea of community control goes all the way back to 1966 in Oakland, California. The Black Panthers, before they were even called Black Panthers or named themselves, were following the cops with the law books. Okay, that's where community control of the police came. There's about 5 or 6 cities that are looking into it and building a momentum for it. And I think that any of these city council members can be defeated because they got to run 2 times in the next 5 years. And the other thing I wanted to say is that there's a split within the police department. There's a group that doesn't want to go with Bob Kroll. And I think it's a minority, but I don't know. Okay, so there is a split. And city council is feeling it.
Do you feel that there are some people going with Bob Kroll even though they don't want to? They're just going along with it
Oh,
just
yeah.
to say they did.
Oh, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
There's, I mean, you could probably describe everything, and there's probably somebody that will fill that.
Yeah.
So, but the key is for the community, and that's everybody, grandma and grandpa. You know, we don't want to be hassled by punk ass kids. Okay, we don't want to be mugged. You know, we don't want our fences, you know, knocked out. You know, I've had that in my neighborhood actually.
Okay.
Okay. So we need to have a certain demeanor in our neighborhoods, but we want everybody respected. We don't want just protection. We want respect for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's all I got to say.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, we got a few more minutes, yeah. What the hell is going on and what do we got to change, if anything at all?
So I think anytime there's an uprising in a city, the media is going to kind of sensationalize any kind of so-called uptick in crime or violent crime. And they want people to ask, what do we do about this crime? When the real question we should be asking is, are the police effective at preventing crime? Which the answer is no, they're not. There's no proof that they are effective at preventing crime. Another question we should be asking is, do you see the police or the politicians coming out to feed people or help the homeless? Which the answer is also no. We see People's F-12 Kitchen is feeding people all over the city.
Yeah, yeah.
We see people coming out and supporting the homeless people in the parks and coming to their aid when the police are the ones trying to harm those families and kick them out. And they're not doing anything to harm their communities. They're just in a tough spot. So what we need is to de-invest the police and reinvest in the communities.
What do you think the mentality is of a city council member like Andrew Johnson, who presides over the 10th ward, I believe it's the 10th ward or the 12th ward, that sees Minnehaha and Hiawatha? He says that it's not an option if they fund a third precinct or not. He's in favor of funding a third precinct, yet has yet to be seen near the wall a long strip of land where a lot of unhoused communities have pitched tents. What do you think the mindset is of somebody that says we need to put $4.8 million into a new third precinct, but yet won't show up to a strip of land in their own ward that houses a large amount of tents in an unhoused community?
I say, where is he? You know, like you just said, we don't see him out here with the community, talking to people and engaging. So his mindset is not of a real Minneapolitan, not of somebody who knows the struggle of somebody that has to live on the streets.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. All right. Who else wanted to come up and speak? We got a few more minutes.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to speak out of question, if that's all right.
Go ahead.
All right. So I'm here today. I traveled from St. Cloud, so I can't, for a lot of these questions, I can't really speak personally to because I'm out of the area. But I do have an experience that I did want to share with you guys tonight. And so on May 30th, I was a part of one of the George Floyd protests here in Minneapolis. I unfortunately, watched the video of his killing, and it really lit something inside of me, and I just knew that I needed to get down here as soon as I could to stand in solidarity with everybody and use my voice and my privilege being white to help combat this institution of this institutionalized racism. And so anyway, so I had come down here on May 30th. It would have been about 5 days after the killing. I think it was on a Saturday or Friday. And I came with 4 other friends who we were acting as medics that night. And so we had milk in our backpacks and goggles, and we were there to support, the people who had been brutalized, by the police with tear gas, etc. And so I just kind of wanted to speak to that and what my experience was there. We got down about 7 p.m. and met right over, I believe it was the 5th precinct, right near Whittier. I'm, again, not too familiar with the area. But it was so cool just to see the community come together, and I could just feel the love and the passion. And anyway, the police, it got bad really quick. Once, at first there wasn't a big police presence, and at that time, that's when I, felt that love and that compassion. But once the police came, I felt a shift in the energy, and that's when we started, seeing the police trying to figure out the word I'm trying to look for, but
Do you feel that they escalated the situation?
They did escalated. Yep, they escalated the situation, and they deployed, the flashbangs, and I saw people getting tear gassed, and it was awful, just seeing that brutality. And so the police, they pushed us back. And it seemed very, strategic. They wanted us out of there. And this would have been after the curfew, so around, I think it went into effect around 9.
Yeah.
And they pushed us back on Whittier. And we had, me and my group of friends, we got separated, which was scary in itself. Like someone mentioned earlier, we're stronger together and in that pack. And once you lose that and you're on your own, it's extra. Extra scary. And so while we were being pushed back, we had met up with some friends that we had met that night. We were kind of hanging around their porch, and we were chatting about, the events of that night and just kind of processing together. And I apologize. I'm trying to. But that's when we saw a big police presence pushing down on Whittier, and there were National Guard, I believe, coming through, and just other law officials. And we, started hearing them, yelling at everyone to get inside, go in your home. And at this point, we were hanging out on their porch, filming. We really wanted to make sure we were documenting anything that we could. And we, weren't listening to their commands to go inside because we knew that we were within our rights, being there on our porch observing. We were, being peaceful, and we had, read that we could be on a porch, especially if it was our own home. And long story short, I know I'm rambling. I'm trying to get all the details. But they fired at us without warning. And it was just devastating. And, we just felt so violated. And I just, and you might have seen the video. It went viral, but...
where the woman was shot at on her front porch?
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So I was one in that group. Okay. There is 2 of the group that got shot. But that too, just that experience, it just awoken something, inside of me, and I just can't stop fighting for, in my head, I suppose, what's right. But
does it make you feel differently about police?
It does, 100%.
How so?
I've always been, kind of iffy about police and the police presence, but it's, in my mind, it's just, it's not the right way to do it.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah, no problem. We have one more person that was lined up, very quickly, and then I don't mean to rush you just because daylight and yeah.
Hi, I liked your question. What the hell is going on, and what the fuck are we gonna do about, or what do we want to do about that?
In so many words.
Those are my words. That is just like, what the hell is going on? And I liked. I had a chance to hear Marsha Howard speak, and she lives in the zone over by the George Floyd Square, and she spoke of the same language you were speaking of that's coming out right now in the media about there's trouble near 39.
Extortion, drug dealing, and they've had many meetings with
here and they're around there,
near. Yeah.
And I heard that, and it's what's going on is it's completely manipulative to people who aren't looking for that yet.
Yeah.
Who aren't looking for that, And so for me to hear that and to have you say that makes my ears prop up and want to make sure I'm listening to that language, and then I can go and tell my neighbors and my friends who aren't listening for that language to begin listening to that language.
Yeah.
It's clearly what they want to do is reclaim. They want to take that block back. They want to make it a national memorial site and bring a ton of federal money in, right, to build some beautiful thing for the George Floyd Square.
Make it beautiful, a beautification project.
For sure, right? So I think what's going on around that is, yes, they want to be sure to be able to shut that down. And what do I want to do about that? I want to unpin city council. Like, I listen, I'm learning so much. Like, I want everything everybody else here wants, from reparations. I want all of it. But I see it in my head, and I'm thinking there is no way around that unless we unpin that shit. Like, that stuff's got to be. They need to lose what needs to happen. They need to lose their jobs.
Yeah.
They're serving us. They need to lose their jobs. They're not serving us. They're not listening to us. They're not allowing us in. To your point, that's what has to happen. They need to lose their jobs. I don't want my money to pay for them any longer. We need to find a way how we can take their jobs away. Do we really need to wait till election? You are failing at your job. You are fired.
Yeah.
Like, seriously.
Yeah.
And that gets down to what's going on with the cops as well. Like, do we really, we know, but we need to find a force of how we're going to handle that. How are we really going to handle city council? No, how are we going to handle their positions?
Yeah.
That's what I need to know, because I'm there. I'm there for the fight. I'll sit in, I'll stand in, but I'm not sure how to unpin that yet. It hinges on the people in power. Well, it does.
Yeah, and folks thank you. And folks can run for city council, I believe, next year, correct? Yes? And the news that I have as we wrap up very quickly here is that I have somebody that I met that worked in city council as just a campaign strategist, and they relayed to me that Lisa Bender doesn't have a lot of money in their war chest. So one of two things is going to happen. She's going to leave and retire for good next year, or she's going to run for mayor. So you're looking at a lot of seats changing, or a lot of the same old ramping up to a more powerful position. So that's what you're looking at right now, and we'll get to that hopefully more in the next forum. I want to hand this off to one of the staffers from CYPB to wrap up for us.
I do want to say this. That's every single council member. I want to say this. Every single council member that's sitting on that council right now ran on a police accountability platform. It wasn't like a sidebar. This was what they ran on. And I want to ask you, how the hell are they doing with it? So that should be, I think some of these damn people, including Fried, need to be a one and done.
Thank you, Michelle. I think the police are playing victims too right now. Yep. So thank you all for coming tonight. Great information. Thanks for sharing. We really appreciate it. We're going to do this again next Friday.